as you're doing these talks, and I realize you're starting with friends and family, and to some degree, I would imagine, somewhat like-minded people.
Some yes, some no.
I mean, I can just also see it difficult and frustrating to have the conversation with, I mean, you personally, and just as a issue, have a conversation with people who are just so disbelieving of climate change and in the data, and that the Earth has gone through cycles before, and this doesn't prove anything, cycle, and this is just, you know, I've done a few. And for whatever their reasons for not believing, or they're having faith in, say, God or something to that end, in which it's God's will, and if we all, you know, have a flood or whatever, you know, that is what it is. I mean, it's hard to feel like there's a significant population that has that sort of either distrust in science or this kind of science that's presented to them,
or what they can do about it.
Or what they can do about it, or has a certain belief that makes them not want to take action, or just be a passive person. So, I mean, how do you sort of break through that, or work around it, or...
I mean, I have empathy, number one, for those people. It's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around. It's incredibly complex, number one, but it's also a complete change of worldview for people, right? Like,
and it's like depressing. It's not like you're telling people
you're telling people bad news and that they have to plan for the future.
Your kids are gonna die.
I can't think of two things that humans hate more than planning for the future and bad news.
And bad news together,
well, to be honest, you're not going to convince everybody, number one. So sometimes I don't try, or I haven't found anybody yet like that, but like, there are some people, I'm never going to sit down with Rush Limbaugh and expect to get a particularly positive result. But there are ways to tear down any argument that they do. I mean, everything that they throw at you can be refuted scientifically or empirically or just culturally and emotionally. Like, there are ways to break these things down, but you know, breaking down a worldview or a belief is a lot harder than getting you to believe that 2 + 2 is 4, because the scientists say it and it's on the paper and we observe that in the real world.
But there's so many other things like that people reject anyway. You know, I have an issue talking with anyone that doesn't believe in evolution.
Right, I was just going to say evolution.
And, you know...
do you know what the science pope is? If I were to ask you what's the science pope, do you know?
The science pope?
Yeah,
I mean,
that little character, what does he represent?
You're the creator.
I know. It's evolving. It's evolving. I've rewritten that section a few times, but it represents a fact-based worldview.
Right.
That's all it is. It's to say things are knowable, and if we go out and we test them, and we use our scientific brains and our rational minds to address these things, we can figure out what's going on. That's all that means. And that is, it turns out, an essential tool in fixing climate change, but it's also a really great way to live your life in general, because you don't get duped and you don't believe things that aren't true. And
I would say, like, I haven't been to all your talks, but I've been to some of the ones with the tougher audiences, and it seems like a lot of times people just want a chance to talk about stuff that they've heard. They're like, well, okay, what about this? And like, then you start being like, oh, you know, and Eric is like, okay, well, have you thought about it in this light? And they're like, all right, but what about this?
So it's like critical thinking.
Yeah, kind of. Because I mean, you know, you're reading. This is somebody who's coming in that you already, you know, like trust and know and
a lot of them, I'm sure, haven't had the time to really sit down and think about it, or do research
and like read more than one source about and who do I believe
anyone
right. So I think that's like almost a big part of it, is just having the chance to actually like process information that they gather.
You are a resource
from random sources,
research, and
there's some baseline level of trust in me because you know my face and you've talked to me before.
So I think